And now I will invite Mariam to transition us to our next speakers.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Wendy and Mohammed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is Mridul Upadhyay. So he is a young peace practitioner from India and has been contributing to peace building through education, advocacy, research, networking, dialogue, and capacity development of individuals, youth-led organizations, public officials, and UN agencies. So he's all over the place, involved everywhere, which is amazing and very inspirational. And so specifically in Asia, he has been supporting several peace-building organizations, networks, and government agencies, such as the United Network of Young Peace Builders, the U.S. Institute of Peace, Youth for Peace International, Search for Common Ground, several UN agencies and grassroots organizations. So I will give him the stage now and let him take the mic and share all of his brilliant work with everyone.
Thank you so much, Mariam, and thank you so much to ICRD for inviting me here. Today, we are discussing a lot of different perspectives of nonviolence. And one of that is how young people have been contributing to nonviolent spaces. And that's what I wanted to share with you from my understanding of coming from India and working with some of these amazing young peace builders and seeing some of these movements growing here. So hope you can see my screen. Today we are going to talk about youth in Ahimsa from the land of Gandhi. So I come from India, and there is one part where I want to share with you about different case studies. So these case studies are something which we will go through and we will try to understand, let's say, how they are in terms of different context of non-violence, how it was implemented, who were the leaders, what were their successes, how much they could really achieve, and then what role young people played in it. And so for that, let me just quickly share it with you. Sorry, just need a very quick 1 minute. I just realized that I wanted to share it in slightly different way.
No worries.
Yeah, this is better.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
So the first thing that I could understand, it was a very broad movement. It was in 1974. So as you know, Mahatma Gandhi died in 1948, and this was in 1974. There was a student union in a particular state of India, and they started protesting against the government. The idea was they were challenging or protesting, let's say, the rising prices of food grains, the cooking oil and other essential commodities, and also a lot of corruption that is there in the high places. They try to reach out to the legislative assembly, but then that was a time when police force came into action, and it killed some of the students. And that's where the student leaders met a specific person, Jayaprakash Narayan, who is considered as a very amazing follower of Gandhi, and he was someone who was part of the independence movement as well. The student wanted to get his leadership, but he had basically quit the active politics long back, and he was primarily engaging in social or constructive work those days. But then when the students reached out, Jayaprakash Narayan again came, let's say, in the kind of mobilization of the communities around political issues, and he launched a mass movement, and it got a lot of support from young people. The idea was to challenge this kind of an unfettered government, because if you know, in India, it was Gandhi and then the Congress who became the main party after the independence, and it continued working for like around until 1974. It had been almost around like 16, 17 years. It felt like there was no alternative to this government, and then government was becoming little bit autocratic in those sense, and there was corruption that was increasing. So he launched this mass movement, and he was also jailed in the emergency. So that's the only, let's say, emergency, a political emergency that has been put in place in the entire country in our last 75 plus years of democratic rule. And now in this emergency, he was jailed, but he came back, and he joined active politics, and he later defeated the entire Congress party in 1977 election. So this is one case that gives us an understanding how young people engaged in the active politics or influence the active politics to a larger extent. The another case is it's in 1980s. It's called the Save the Narmada movement. Narmada is a river in central East India. It starts from central India and goes towards the eastern. Sorry, it should be central west actually. It goes towards the western coast of the India. So and government was trying to construct a big dam. It was primarily idea was a lot of large dam, medium dams, small dams over this long 1,300 kilometer length of the river. Now, when you will build these kind of dams, of course, the villagers who are living at the coast of that river will get affected. Their land, the land that they are farming, they will be not able to farm that because if you will increase the water level, they will have to be displaced. But then displacement mechanisms were not put in place. A lot of young people and other people started feeling that they will not have any livelihood opportunity. So they started registering against it. And this movement is continuing since last past 37 years. So in that sense, it can be considered as the longest living Gandhian satyagraha. It has displaced farmers as well as those who were facing other kind of upheavals. Um, in 2021, of course, there were different actions that were happening, but very specifically in 2012, sorry, there were 51 men and women who actually went, and when government decided to raise water level of one of the specific dams, they stand in that raising like deep till neck deep water for almost 15 days continuously. An idea was to protest the government's action. Eventually, authorities were forced to think of some of the demands about their resettlements. In same year, this idea was also taken up by the People's Movement Against Nuclear Energy in southern India, where they started demonstrations against the power plant in southern India, where this power plant was actually kind of considered as a threat to the community. So they started standing in seawater near the coast, near to this power plant. So I think this has been the another kind of movement that we saw. The third case is basically related to the corruption itself. So like already mentioned, 1970s itself, we were dealing corruption. And it continued for over 50 years. We had a lot of public administration related issues. So yes, we have a really strong democracy, but then it was always a challenge of how public funds were used. There were calls for establishing a citizens ombudsman, but then government continued to waver on this issue for decades. Finally, another follower of Gandhi, Anna Hazare, in 2011 actually led a movement which was called India Against Corruption Movement. And this was also supported by young people a lot. In a specific incident, Anna Hazare went on indefinite hunger strike to put pressure on the government to enact a bill which would eventually deter corruption or redress grievances and also protect whistleblowers. And Anna Hazare ended this fast after 12 days, when actually he got some reassurance from it. And then a political party was also formed. And this political party got really good success in the first assembly election itself. Like they won 67 out of the 70 seats in the capital, in New Delhi. And then they have been doing good. So this is another kind of case. Then non-violence was also used recently itself, and that's a beautiful example, very much relevant to look into when we sometimes hear that possibly non-violence is not something that can be used to gain political gains at this point of time, or to gain political advancements on the strong governments that we have, let's say, or the police force or other people. So this happened actually back in September 2020, when Government of India initiated 3 farm acts. In October 2020, same year, that was precisely 103 years after Gandhi's first non-violent protest in India. That protest happened in 1917 actually, and that was also for farmers. So amazing coincidence. So the Indian farmers in North India primarily, they came together under a farmers union, and they started coordinating one of the largest ever farmers protest against these acts. Some of these acts had already started in August itself. Over 430 days, which is like almost 1 year and 2 months, these farmers held they were sit-ins. They kind of very major part of Delhi, like they kind of cut off Delhi from connectivity with some of the other states. But at that point of time, they were also facing a lot of provocation, and they were also labeled as anti-national and someone who is trying to break the country, or kind of looking for separation from the country. Because these farmer had also one identity, which is like primarily, let's say, the people from Punjab, so people who wear turbans, Sikh, and that's why they were also called, like they are looking for creating a different state, and that's why they are mobilizing so much. But then it worked out. While 750 protesters actually lost their lives, on 19th of November next year, in 2021, Prime Minister announced his intention to repeal these farm acts. So that was something that actually happened. Now, what has been role, like some other movements I want to just talk about. So there have been a food movement in 1959, when student actually took action. There was another movement where kind of within like there was a big state in India, and that needed to be bifurcated because young people from certain geography in that state were facing a lot of discrimination in job, or not finding that much job opportunities. There were student movements during the emergency that I already talked about. There were Pride March that happened in 2008, and then finally it kept moving. And after 10 years of that Pride March that started in 2008, the Supreme Court of India struck down the section 377. So kind of it depenalized, let's say, the same-sex relationships. So that was also something successful. There was one in 2012 when there was a brutal gang rape that happened in the capital, and young people came together to push the idea about how young women can be protected from sexual crimes. There were other movements like student university, where student in a university in eastern part of the country, where there was a case of sexual assault, and when university authorities didn't actually address it well, the sit-in started, and student also had to face a lot of police action at that point of time. There were also an action against, let's say, discrimination for a certain community. And this was when a student actually he was pursuing his PhD in University of Hyderabad, which is in south of India, and he comes from so-called lower caste in India, and he committed suicide and left a note where he called his birth as a fatal incident. And it actually sparked a nationwide movement, how young people, even when they are getting so good education, they are having really good kind of status in terms of education, but still they are facing the same kind of discriminatory comments or discrimination in general related to the caste that they come from. And then maybe you have also heard of it. There was this anti-CEA. So in December 2019, government passed a Citizenship Amendment Act, which actually enabled Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Parsi, Buddhist, and Christians, illegal immigrant from 3 countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, which, if you can see, these are Muslim majority countries. So if any of these religious community people are coming to India, they're living here as illegal immigrant for more than 5 years, they will be given citizenship. But this was not offered to, let's say, Hindus or the same these illegal migrants from any other country, not, let's say, Sri Lanka, where there has been let's say, conflict between Buddhists and Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus. So there was no mention of Sri Lanka, and there was no mention of Muslims as well. And of course, young people stand against it, and there was a lot of movement happening. Now, when you see all of this, and then there are studies, there are research which says that young people are less concerned with politics, they are less politically knowledgeable, do not participate in social and political activities, or they are more apathetic or have low level of political interest. I think that's a big issue. Usually, young people seen as XYZ, but not, let's say, someone who is politically engaged and who is very much want to change the community for better good. That's something which raises a lot of alarm. And that happens because young people are either considered as a beneficiary of the policies. So you start developing education or health kind of systems, or you see young people as demographic dividend for economic development. So you kind of try to reap them as if they are resource like minerals, cattle, or forest. But you, like, usually, or if you see in the context of peace and conflict or violence, young people are usually seen as a victim who need to be supported, or a perpetrator of the violence who need to be stopped. But then young people are not able to seen as a peace builder, someone who brings a comparative advantage, and that creates a lot of mistrust. And that's why they are not included in decision making. That's why they face a lot of violence. Now, why we are talking about young people's engagement and how they should be supported in these cases is that number one is currently world's most of the population, majority 60% is under the age of 35. Young people are the majority of population where we have fragile or conflict affected societies, but they are also the first responders and quick to adapt whenever they are facing any of such scenarios. So young people bring a comparative advantage, and they are the current leader in many of these fields. I see many of them are running amazing initiatives on these issues. Now, if you don't see them, this is the kind of ignorance or negligence or exclusion that you get. So I was reviewing India's national youth policy, which caters to 400 million young people, which is almost like much more than, let's say, population of US itself. It has education, skills, and employment mentioned many times, like 100 times, 71 times, 45 times. But harmony is mentioned only 8 times, and peace is mentioned just like 0 times. Like there is no mention of peace at all. So nobody is seeing young people have anything to do with peace building and do something about it. Similarly, if we talk about active politics, then there is currently only one member of parliament who is under the age of 30, which makes only 0.2% of the population. Now, India's median age is 28 years, but the lower house members' average age is 57 in the parliament. So basically, decisions about majority of the country are being made by someone who are on an average 30 years elder to them. So that's also a big issue. Like no decision is being made from the perspective of what young people are already doing or already thinking. Another issue is how much government spends on young people's leadership. So that comes out to only 20 cents in a year. 20 cents, like that's not even sufficient to buy a sandwich in an year for a young person, but that's what government of India, the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, is spending on a youth in its leadership. So that's the issue. Now another issue is also related to how young people face a lot of protection related threats. So nearly 53% of the people who are arrested under this unlawful prevention activity act in 2018, 19, 20, they were below age of 30. So most of the people who were actually arrested, they were age of less than age of 30. And this makes up more than 2,500 people in last 3 years. While you realize that it might be, let's say, Delhi or Kashmir or any Northeast Indian state that might have a lot of such people, let's say, getting arrested, but it is my state, Uttar Pradesh, that you might not even heard out of like in India. You might have heard Agra, which is a city of Taj Mahal, but that's a state, Uttar Pradesh. So they get like 205 arrests in single year, and they top that entire list. Now, issue with this law is that this is an anti-terrorism law, but in this, police can keep you in custody for 180 days, which is half the year, without filing even a charge sheet. So if you want to shut someone up, you just put them in the jail, and you don't need to worry about even like filing a criminal case for something against them. And that's the reason recently, yesterday itself, there was, yeah, I think yesterday itself, there was a report that came out from People's Union for Civil Liberties, who find out that 97% of these people who are put into the jail, they are eventually acquitted. So basically, the idea is that you just put young people under the jail and you do not let them engage in civic activism, and that's a big issue. So young people are actually raising voices. Young people like me, they are trying to raise voice for recognizing young people's peace building work, including them in decision making, and also supporting their peace building work. And that also is connected to UNSCR, United Nations Security Council resolution. So we went to UN in 2015 from all over the world, and finally we got this resolution, which first ever resolution to recognize the positive role that young people play in peace building. And there are different pillars. I can share more details about it. Yeah, so I think these are the some things that I wanted to quickly share with you. Thank you so much. I have taken a lot of time.
Wow, thank you so much. I thought that was an amazing speech. I think it was apologies for my voice. I have allergies. I loved everything that you talked about, all of the insights you gave on youth engagement, especially in the context of Asia and India. I think we have time for one quick question. So it's from, and for everyone else, please feel free to, continue putting your questions in the chat. If Mridul is going to stick around and able to engage with the networking session at the end, it'll be a great opportunity to continue the conversation. But we have a quick question from Dr. Asna Hussain, who will be speaking after you. So that's interesting, but she is asking, are young people in India doing something against the brutality that the Muslim population is facing due to government policies, or is that too dangerous to be part of? And I would, just like to expand on her question from my own self. How does that danger, do you think, relate to youth engagement, youth movement in India? Or in general, because you just showed us a bunch of statistics about youth being jailed and acquitted off most of the time unfairly. So how does that, do you think, play into the numbers of youth and their ability to engage and mobilize?
Oh, sorry, I wrote by mistake here, but I wanted to type something else, which is this anti-CA agitation. I think this was one example which I already captured. So this was primarily, it was like very openly, of course, policy wise, it looks like, okay, there is no discrimination. Of course, we want to become or give affirmative action to the religious minority communities of our neighboring Muslim majority states, which is Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. We want to protect, let's say, all of the religious minorities by giving them citizenship in India. So it looks completely fine. But you see that you are like, you are giving preference on the basis of minority, religious minority. And in Pakistan also, in Bangladesh also, in Afghanistan also, there are different kind of religious groups. Within Muslims, there are divides, and they are also facing a lot of discrimination in their own countries, even if, let's say, the country is Muslim majority. So they should also be getting support. And that was also related to the inner things in India, which is, let's say, how we have a kind of an increasing divide between the Hindu majority and Muslim minority communities. And that's where people stood against it. This anti-CA agitation is where, like, people really were vocal. There were a lot of marches happened over 3 or 4 months, a lot of sit-in happened. So yes, young people are engaging in it, but then they faced all of those unlawful action prevention, unlawful activity prevention act kind of things. So there were various ways, like their communities also were uh, kind of turned against to them. So of course they were put in jail, and how they were put in jail is that police was just kind of, let's say, recording all the marches that were happening. And when young people were coming out in the march, so of course there is one fear that if police is reporting the peaceful march, they can just put anyone in the jail. Second is, police actually did that. They see who was in the kind of those marches, and it was completely peaceful march. And then police actually send them notices. They ask them to come to the police station and all that. That happened. But also they took screenshot of those people, and they created big billboards, and they put those billboards in their communities. So and saying like, these kind of like, these are the traitors of the community, these are the people who are kind of standing against the government. So these kind of things actually happen, and young people are still facing on it. Of course, not everyone is doing it. It's like, young people are very diverse, so they engage in all of their diversity. But yes, that's happening. Some people are engaging as a victim, some people are engaging as a perpetrator, and many people are also engaging as a peacemaker. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Mridul. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and speak to us.